You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Anna Deshawn, Q Crew and friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
What's good people? You know this is your girl Anna Deshawn right here on Wake Up with Anna and Friends, only on E3 Radio. And we've got a new friend in the building. We got Barry from Pods in Color. What's going on, Barry?
What's going on? What's going on?
I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Y'all, for folks that don't know, Barry, man, you are one of very few Black women like in the podcasting space, created a wonderful space called Pods in Color, which is curating exactly that, podcasts by people of color in one place. And you have created a directory, a library full of amazing content. So first off, thank you for that work. And you got to tell the good people how in the world you got into podcasting. And let's just start there. How in the world did you get into podcasting and got so passionate about it?
I'm in Denver, Colorado. Currently, that's where I live, born and raised. And so I got into it because I'm addicted to social media. I don't have any children or the other things that people have to, have responsibility. So I'm addicted to social media. And I've followed Kay Fury and Crystal for a while. So when they dropped the link to their podcast, I immediately listened. And it felt like the kind of thing that a lot of other people gather to too. And I understood I could find them and other people I like would like them, but how do they find them? None of my friends were on social media. Most of my friends are like her on Twitter. So they were Facebook people. So I was just like, how do I help other people find podcasts, especially things that I'm liking? And I'm one of those people that I do obsessive things. I like romance books. I like different things. So I'm like, I know I can find what I like. So I would like to help you find what you like in that same area. And that's how Podcast in Color was born.
I love it. And that's certainly the impetus for what we're doing too with the Cube, is that right now there's over 2 million podcasts in the marketplace. That's insane, isn't it?
Yes. And it's really more than that, in my opinion, but
it probably is. That's just what I've seen reported. And so the marketplace in and of itself is very saturated. And I'll say that all of it isn't great, right? So how do we find the good stuff in all of it, right?
I don't think the market is saturated. I'll say that, start there.
Okay.
I would say mostly, I think finding the good stuff, we're getting there. We have things like Cube, we have Podcasts in Color. There's a Black Pod Collective, there's Latina podcasters. There's a whole bunch of different groups that are helping do different things. But I feel like with Black people, we understand different things and that we find things through each other. So I'm it's gonna be, we kind of wanted to depend on Apple Podcasts and they've done better, but we all know that we approved something because a friend approved it. It's not we'll be at work with a whole bunch of white people and they'll be they like something, you're and then you go home and one of your friends hit you up did you hear about this? And you're oh, they was talking about that, but I didn't know we liked it. So, it's the kind of thing of you need that cosign of somebody you like or you really, think well of to say they like these things too. So I think that's part of it, is getting people to talk about podcasts and listening to podcasts, because we found out really at the beginning of podcasting in that first year is people were listening, but they didn't really talk about it online or other places. So you didn't know what people were listening to. And so that's what I really tried to do with hashtags and different things, is get people to talk about what they're listening to, because with podcasts, you don't have to post about it. You can have a whole thing. It can be like Netflix and movies. Unless you tell me you're listening, how should I know? So I think it just has to be, the conversation around podcasts has to grow from being just a private thing I do to a thing we share with each other and tell friends about. And we're not trying to force them to listen, but we're just trying to let you know other things exist.
I'm with you on that. So it's been a very interesting journey, right? So as I began to post around podcasts, I was listening to, asking people what podcasts they're listening to. All of a sudden it became a thread, right? Of 50, 60, 70 comments on Facebook. And I'm like, you listening to podcasts? They're like, yeah, I listen to podcasts all the time. And I'm like, why have we never talked about this? You know, I got a radio show. Why you understand?
Put me on. Like, why wouldn't you?
And then understanding that, you know, people aren't sharing these podcasts they're listening to. I'm like, we got to do better. And I think that what you created with Pods in Color is just such a beautiful representation of that. In addition to what else I'm finding, to your point, with the other networks and other directories and libraries, very specific, right? To people's ethnicities or sexual orientations, gender expressions. And I think it's all really, really great. So let's talk about something else. The state of podcasting today, right?
A mess.
A whole mess, Barry. Is it a whole
Mess?
What kind of mess is it?
It's a whole mess, but it's coming together. It's one of them things where it's like you threw everything in the middle of the room so you could clean up, but you're going to get it clean. You just have to go to the dirty part to get to the better part. And that's where I feel like we're coming to.
I'm with you. And so that's why I start with saying I feel like it is saturated in that there's so much to get through till you get to the good stuff sometimes. And so places like my hope, the Cube, will be one of those places where people can find the good. I also think what I find is really beautiful about podcasting is its accessibility to folks, right? And so the lack of barriers to being able to speak your truth and create your own space in the world. And today I'm finding like audio is like crazy taking off. So people be like, Anna, are you on Clubhouse? I'll be like, I tried. And then they be like, come on, you got to try this other room. I'll be like, You send me the room and I promise I'll try it again. But there's been this amazing, I find, like growth happening in audio. So Twitter's got its own spaces. I went into Facebook the other day and they're like, add a room. And I'm like, everybody got a room. So did you see this coming, or did you know it was coming? How do you feel about all these spaces being created?
One thing we're coming into is a bump, because there's 2 million plus podcasts, but 2 million plus podcasters don't know how to market their podcast, don't know how to be seen, don't know how to use links that, aren't just Apple or aren't just their hosting thing and that sort of thing. So we're coming to a hump in podcasting where I like the word you mentioned was accessibility, because that's exactly what these audio apps, which is Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, and the rest of them are doing in different ways. But one thing Twitter Spaces does that podcasting is moving into is captions, which is transcripts, but you don't have it after the space. But during the space, you can see captions as it's live happening. And most people don't. I'm not going to say most people don't. I'm going to say I feel a lot of people don't in podcasting see that literally so soon. And it's just going to be one day where it's going to be all the big companies flip and they have transcripts on all their podcasts, making it accessible, making it Googleable, making it quotable. And then everybody else is smaller. It's like, do I have the money? Because it's expensive to do those kind of things. And so I feel like these audio apps are kind of pushing the thing, because Clubhouse not having a thing where, somebody that is deaf could like read the room or different things, like a lot of that has come up in the different things that we're doing. So as you're saying, I think these audio apps are pushing us further in podcasting, because you're getting something live and it makes you ask questions you couldn't ask if you were just listening to a podcast. Like if you're listening to a podcast after the fact, you can't come and say, why don't we have this? Or why don't we have that? Or anybody listening. But if you're in Clubhouse and you're like, it's 400 of us in here, but I didn't understand what that person with a heavy accent said. So it would have been great if we had captions or transcripts or something, and it forces the conversation forward. So I do believe these audio apps are forcing us forward in conversation in podcasting, which I had to come around to, because I was a never Clubhouse person. And I only joined this year, which I feel like is behind everyone. And that's only because I saw Twitter is coming and I'm like, this is going to be an even bigger thing on Twitter than it could be in an app that other people have to download. So I want to know what I need to be doing when it gets over here.
Yeah, that's real. Always staying ahead of the curve. That's part of this, the challenge we live in, and staying in the know about what's happening next. I think to that point, into what you're saying, the lack of knowledge around marketing and promotion, how to monetize and things like that. But I think ownership of your podcast and what it means to own the IP to your content is also a big part of the conversation for people who are looking to take it to the next level. People who are, we're not just trying to start a podcast. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there about that.
Yes.
I mean, for hours and days, probably months of content, years of content out there about how to start a podcast. But how do you make it so that you own it, so that you understand the business of podcasting? I mean, what are some of your thoughts around that?
I feel like that's what I usually try to usher people into as they're getting into podcasts. Like, I'm thinking of myself as like a 102 space or like the next level up. And a lot of things I've been doing is talking about scaling up and not just starting as in podcasting, because most people are like, I got an LLC. And it was like, but don't cover what you think it covers. That's not covering podcast IP. There's a lot more conversations in that. And so I try to bring people in, and I can say the rude of me is rude. So I really do try to work on like how I say things or thinking about things like, hey, you see things like black and white. And I'm here to tell you about this whole gray area you're not noticing. And that's going to matter to you soon before you even think about it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, my first question to people when they say like, you know, I have an LLC or like, we're good. And I say, if $1,000 came in, how is that split? Is it half and half? Is it, you know, all to the company? Who says that? Or who can take money? And I was like, who can take money? Like, you know, and I ask a couple questions. It's like, well, we would do this. And then the other person's like, well, I would have said, and that's like, yeah. And that's why y'all see just that little thing of how y'all thought differently on that thing. That's why you need IP conversations. Who owns what? Who can do what? Who controls the money? Who is this? Who is that? And it's like, there's a lot of things, especially with audio, that a lot of people aren't noticing. I'm like, with video, it was kind of clear, but with audio, people are like, is this fair use? Is it not? And it's like understanding what you own. And if somebody uses, say, a 20-minute clip from your podcast and their podcast and being able to call them out on it or get money from it, which has happened, it's like understanding how those things happen. Like, should that person be able to use that or not? That's a real thing. Like, I know, and just talking about IP in the beginning of podcasting, I'm like, why wouldn't you guys want music in your podcast? I love that the read has a different song every week and all of that. But I did understand, like, okay, that is true. That person did make something they should get paid for. And if that isn't being paid for with you when you're including it in your podcast, but you want to be paid for your podcast or stuff, like, how can you include somebody free work, but you're trying to say you should get paid on the other thing? So it's like, so many complicated things that answer when you get into IP, who owns what you should be using, and those kind of things. And I feel like that kind of helps you clear the base of podcasting so that you can go on and grow up in podcasting and then not be like a mess every time you try to level up in podcasting.
100%. And I love those, as you put it, 102 conversations, those scaling of conversations, because at some point, if you continue to do it after a while, you're going to get to that place. So after you get past the basics of being consistent and sounding good and finding your voice and finding your audience and finding your people, then it's more about like, how do I begin to make some money back? Okay, this is not a cheap situation. Audio, what we know for sure is that if video go out and your audio sound bad, you're done. Okay, but if your video go out and your audio still good, they might hold on for a little bit longer. Okay, so audio is so incredibly important to telling the story, and you're gonna want to figure out how you own it, and how do you monetize it? How do you grow? And I love that you are and cultivating those conversations with your community and how you've done that. Now, I can't have you on the show, Barry, without figuring out and hearing from you on who are some of your favorite, or maybe what you're listening to right now, as far as podcasts are concerned, or what you want to put out here and tell the people they should be listening to.
I really love the B-List with Pet Shop Boy. One thing I tell people, and they don't necessarily always get it, but I'm like, I love people who love things. So one thing about it is like, you can talk about something you're passionate about. I'm never going to get into it. probably never gonna watch the show, never that. But if you are passionate about it, you have a show about it, I'll listen to you talk about that and get into you listening to you talk about it. So he talks about the Real Housewives shows, and he's like connected to the brand in that way, and like he talked to his friends about that. And I'm like, I enjoy somebody who's knowledgeable about stuff and really is into it and isn't embarrassed to be into it or like things and that kind of thing. So Pet Shop Boy, I'm sorry, the list with Pet Shop Boy. I'm trying to think. There's Call Your Girlfriend. That's I call it oldie but a goodie. Is one I've listened to, I feel like, forever. But it's like, it covers everything. I feel like that was one of the first podcasts where it was like, this is for women that aren't in their 20s. This is for us having mature conversations, not like we're in college or something, but conversations we should just be having as women in 30s and growing up about relationships, about like, they even Call Your Girlfriend has a book now called Big Friendship, but like about friendship. And I feel like they really taught me how to be more intentional about friendship, and like friendships just don't happen and you still have to keep up with them, and that's another relationship. And I have to really be past that, because you kind of think friendships are going to last forever, and it's like, that is not a true thing.
Not at all, child. They in a season for a reason, okay? It be reasons for seasons.
They really helped me with that. Like, you know, there is a reason. And sometimes some friends are just for a couple of years. And then I will say, you can't really even see it, I'm wearing a shirt today. It's for Truth's Table, a podcast. And they are a Christian-based podcast of ladies. And I just love their energy. Like, starting off, they were really big at having live shows and like really pushing themselves on Instagram and things like that. And I'm attracted to that. Like, yes, I love that you're marketing yourself. I love that you're pushing yourself. Some people feel like I posted twice, is that too much? I'm like, no, post more. Like, post until somebody say you shouldn't post, and then post more after that. Like, who cares? So they're one of the people that I was just like, I love the energy, I love the logo, and just podcasts I saw and started paying attention to.
I love it. Now, I'm telling y'all this right now. If Barry says you need to listen to it, just go ahead and go do that thing, okay? And then you also need to go and follow Pods in Color if you're not doing that already. Instagram, Twitter, their website as well. Go subscribe, do all the things, okay? Barry is the truth. She's been in the game for a long time. I'm honored to have you on the show, Barry, and honored that you're able to share all your knowledge with us. I know this is the first time, but my hope is that it's not the last time that you join us on the show.
Oh, I hope not. Not at all.
I hope not.
I'm pretty big about like, once I connect with somebody and we're okay, because not embarrassed, okay. I'm okay to connections for the future. I'm one of those people where I'm like, there's nobody I talk to every day. But if you could reach out to me after we haven't talked 3 or 4 months, I'm the person open to that. Like, oh yeah, we can have a conversation like we talked yesterday. So yes, reach out to me. I'm open to things.
Barry's open to things, so Barry will be back. You feel me? So you know what you're doing. You're locked in to Anna Deshawn on Wake Up with Anna and Friends. Don't go nowhere. We got more on the way. Stay close.